back, Ed of Soul Tar Solutions, and today I am here on Focus Forward with a phenomenal guest. We are going to talk about a very exciting topic, which is selling rights to foreign publishers for authors. So I know you're going to want to stay tuned for that. But before we launch into that, I just want to talk for a second about Gary Vaynerchuk's Jab, 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 Right Hook. Awesome book, great. It's all about social media, and it's all about really how to drive your business through social media. And I got to tell you, I've been doing a lot of social media, and I've been doing it for a while. And it's good to kind of have a base before you get into this book. But once you get into this book, it is great because you'll learn so much, not only about what's happening now, but what the future of social media is going to be. So he gives a lot of great advice. I recommend it to every business owner because we absolutely have to keep up on this. It is the wave of the future as well as the now. So I'm really excited to have our guest here today. I am going to be talking with Shel Horowitz, and he is author of 8 books, including Guerrilla Marketing Goes Green, which he's been on our show talking about before. So Shel, thank you so much for being on the show today.
It's good to be back, Lori.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward for you to tell us your experience with selling foreign rights to your books. So let's launch right in. So tell me, how was it?
Well, it's been a little different each time. I have had 4 different books that have been published abroad. Some of those were self-published, and some of those were traditionally published. The most recent book, Guerrilla Marketing Goes Green, was traditionally published, and rights were sold to both Italy and Turkey. So it's really kind of cool to pick up a copy of my book in Turkish, where I can read my name on the cover and a little bit more, as opposed to the Japanese and Korean books where I can't read anything. But interestingly enough, one of the things I think that's different for me is that 2 of the sales were for one of my self-published books, Principal Profit. And I think it's somewhat unusual for people to be able to sell a book to a foreign country when a big publisher isn't involved on this end.
So do you think it's more difficult for a self-published author to sell their book direct? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, but the nice thing is if you succeed, then, oh, wow, you have just made yourself stand out from the millions of other self-published books out there. Somebody else has given you a huge quality seal. Somebody has said your book is worth not only buying, but actually translating and spending money on it. So I think that's pretty cool. And there are certainly many other self-publishers who have succeeded in foreign rights.
So you sell the rights in a foreign country to publish your self-published book. What does that do for your self-published book here in the U.S.?
Well, basically nothing, except that, again, it's a credibility builder. When people land on your website and they say, oh, this book that he self-published has been republished by major publishers in Mexico and India, it says that this is a book worth paying attention to.
Well,
that's I can't really attribute sales to that.
Oh, okay. So it's not boosting your sales here.
No, and that book is now out of print. That book, actually, I resold the American rights to Wiley, and it became Guerrilla Marketing Goes Green.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. So do you think that had any effect on you actually selling the rights to a U.S. publisher?
Absolutely. I think that I had a string of credentials, awards I had won, and huge numbers of endorsements, and 2 foreign sales, and on and on and on, great reviews. These things together combined to make a package that made the book attractive to a major U.S. publisher.
Okay, so can we veer off the topic a second here, Shel? I know you're an expert. I think you can handle it. But I just want to know, how does one go about getting those awards? Or, I don't know how to do that. How do you do that?
You enter them, and you enter them with a book that is suitable and that is likely to do well. Actually, a number of my books, both self-published and traditionally published, have won at least one award. I think at least 4 of those books have won awards. So, for example, you can enter the Ben Franklin Awards, which is one that I haven't won, or the Ippies, or Forward Magazine Book of the Year, which for this book, the original Grassroots Marketing, that one was a finalist for Forward Magazine's Book of the Year award the year after it came out. Okay, so the Principal Prophet won something called an Apex Award, and that has many, many categories, and mine won in the book category. It's for PR and marketing communications. And it won some other awards that I can't remember right now. The book came out already 11 years ago. But, you know, basically you cannot win if you don't enter. There are very few awards that someone else nominates you for. You've got to go out and pay your $50 or $100 entry fee and get in there. But there's probably a few dozen legitimate awards that you can enter. And you pick the ones that are right for your book, and you look at who's won in the past, and you see, is my book going to compete with this? And if the answer is no, you save your money and enter a different one.
Okay, great. And where does someone find out about where the awards are, or, you know, how does somebody find out about this?
Well, certainly Dan Pointer's newsletter would be a good place to start. I think he lists a lot of them, and that's parapublishing.com, P-A-R-A publishing.com. Probably John Kramer's website, bookmarket.com, has some listings of awards that you can enter. And if you're a member of, for example, Independent Book Publishers Association, then you'll get their newsletter, and that will tell you about the Ben Franklins. And if you're a member of what used to be called SPAN, is now called something else, you know, you'll hear about this if you basically stay tapped in.
Okay, so stay tapped in. Great advice. Thanks for letting me find out about that from you. And now we'll get back onto topic. So you, according to what I understand, you actually sold the foreign rights for 4 books, 2 for the same book and 2 for separate books. Is that right?
Let me think. There were 2 for Principal Prophet, 2 for Guerrilla Marketing Goes Green, which the publisher sold those. 1 for Marketing Without Megabucks to Korea, which was sold by my agent, and 1 for my very first book, Nuclear Lessons, was published in Japan. And quite frankly, I don't really know how that deal came about. I found out about it decades later when, after Fukushima happened, the big nuclear accident in Japan a couple of years ago, they came to me and said, "We want to bring your book back into print in the Japanese edition." And I said, "There's a Japanese edition?" Because my co-author had never bothered to tell me that there was a Japanese edition, never had sent me a copy, and I was really quite shocked. So the funny thing is that had been a work-for-hire deal back in 1979, right after 3 Mile Island. The original co-authors of the book contracted with me to update it for 1979, and it was published in 1980. And then I actually got more money for the 10-page introduction I wrote for the 2011, 2012, whatever it was, the year that Fukushima happened. To update the book with a 10-page introduction, I got more money than I got the first time around for writing the whole book. So it was kind of a hoot.
That's amazing.
Yeah, who knew? I mean, how could I must be the only author who ever had a foreign edition and didn't know it.
Well, I don't know that you're the only author that's happened to, because I've talked to quite a few people to do research for this show, and I have heard so many stories. I'm happy that I've talked to people with good experiences. Seriously, so it seems like it's pretty prevalent for things to just go awry somewhere in the mix. So tell me, for you, what worked for you to be able to sell these foreign rights?
Well, for one thing, I had a product that was unique, particularly with Principal Prophet and with Guerrilla Marketing Goes Green. There are just not a lot of people writing books about how green and ethical business strategies are not only the right thing to do, but they're also really good for business. Business makes money when you do these things. So, and particularly back in 2003, 2004, when Principal Prophet was a new book, this was really, I don't want to say a radical idea, but kind of a heresy. And, you know, at that point, I would say to people, I have this book on business ethics as a profitable business venture. And people would say, business ethics? That's an oxymoron. Well, I don't hear that. The other thing I don't hear anymore is green is too expensive. It's too hard. The climate has really changed. And I like to think that my work has had at least something to do with that.
Well, I read your book and I love your book. I love the Guerrilla Marketing Goes Green. It had really simple things that people could do right now. You know, you get up from watching the show and you can make changes that are going to make a difference. And the other thing I liked about it was there was a component in that book that really empowered people to kind of fight against the big guys and win. So, you know, the marketing aspect of that book, it was so powerful when you were talking about, specifically about the mountain and saving the mountain. And when, I think about that a lot because a lot of people, when I'm talking about marketing with them, they're like, wow, that sounds like a lot of work and I don't really have time and this and that. And you went at that every single angle you could think of. I mean, it was all out massive action. And one of the things I know about marketing is all out massive action works. You know what they say, 50% of the marketing works. We never know which 50. So I always think, whenever I think about you, I always think about that particular story. So that's etched in my brain. So really, when you're looking at this, it seems like you're a pioneer in this movement, and then you still continue with it. So you're continuing to make a difference.
Yes, and thank you, by the way, for all the nice things you just said about my work. And yeah, the Save the Mountain campaign was extremely exciting because we were faced with a situation where I live with a state park and a small 900-foot mountain literally in my backyard. And the next mountain over, a developer was going to put 40 McMansions on it. And all the experts were wringing their hands and saying, oh, this is terrible, there's nothing we can do. And while they were kvetching, my wife and I organized a movement. And we stopped the thing flat. We allowed them to build 2 houses at the bottom. And we did this. I thought it would take 5 years. It took 13 months. And it involved literally thousands of people. And it also involved everything that I knew about both community organizing and marketing. And yes, a lot of marketing is just showing up and being there and saying, yes, we can do this, and not accepting the status quo. So it was tremendously exciting. This was a huge year, and it did take a lot of time. I will not shy away from saying that. It was an enormous quantity of time. But here I've got a legacy now that every time I drive past that mountain and I look up and I see the hillside not full of houses, I know that I made a difference.
That's amazing. Shel, do me a favor. Hold up that book again, please, because I want everyone out there that's interested in marketing, and everyone should be interested in marketing because marketing is the most important thing, I want everybody to look at this book because in this book, there are so many great marketing ideas. In those pages, I tell you right now, this could be the only book that you ever really need to read about marketing. I mean, I have a whole shelf full of books, but this book, I'll tell you, was phenomenal. The way that you went about doing that particular campaign and the creative strategies that you put in place and the way you got all the community involved. Not only did you save the mountain, but you build a powerful community and really taught people that they can stand up for themselves and what they believe in. So I cannot recommend that book highly enough. So that's what I have to say about that book.
Marketing slut that I am, I have to say, Lori, could you please put that in writing so I can put it on my website with a link back to you?
Well, you know what? I'm going to do that. I'm absolutely going to do that because I would not say it if I did not believe it. But the way you went about that campaign was it was phenomenal. So back to topic. I have to keep on topic.
I just want to point out that what I just did was seizing the moment to grab a testimonial, okay? And if you go on my websites, whether it's guerrillamarketinggoesgreen.com or greenandprofitable.com or frugalmarketing.com, you're going to be inundated with testimonials.
Because and when testimonials people say, sell.
Yes, they do. I have a testimonial from Jack Canfield in Principled Profit. I watched that sell books over and over again.
That's awesome. Well, Jack Canfield, it's amazing because Jack Canfield is, he's a personal friend of mine. I work with him, coach with him. I have done so many different things with him. So I know Tony Rosen, that my engineer, is now cracking up about somebody else mentioning Jack Canfield except me. So, okay, so what are the perils of selling foreign rights on your own?
Well, you probably do want to bring in an agent to make the negotiations happen, because the agents know what clauses in a contract are malleable and what are permanent. The agents know the range of advances that you can expect to get in different markets. The agent can go after them. Like I discovered actually with both the companies that republished Principled Profit, both the Indian and the Mexican publisher went into second editions and didn't tell me. And I found out by accident cruising for my name on the internet. I'm like, what's this? Ethics and Marketing in a paperback. What's this? Mercadotecnia Ganar Ganar. Because in the Mexican case, they actually changed the title for the second edition. And in the Indian case, they went from hardback to paperback. So because I brought in an agent, even though I basically sold those by exhibiting at the IBPA booth at Book Expo America. But still, when I was negotiating the contract, I let an agent do that for me. And then I could go to the agent and say, hey, agent, man, what's going on here with these books? Do they owe me any money? And they certainly owe me copies of the new edition.
Okay, great. So just give me the lowdown, because I hear two sides of the story. One group says, oh, you absolutely have to be at Book Expo of America. Other people say, you know what, been there, done that. It's just today's news, you don't need to go. From your perspective, what do you think?
Well, I have gone to every Book Expo America since 1997. But some of that is that the majority have been in New York City. In New York City, I can drive there, I can leave my car at my in-laws for free, and I can stay there for free. So it cost me practically nothing to go there. But even when it was in Chicago and LA and Washington, I did make the trip. And the only book deal that I can tell you that actually happened because of my going to Book Expo America was this one, Grassroots Marketing, which, I believe it or not, actually the conversation that initiated.
It's a beautiful book.
Thank you.
It's
this
a
was
beautiful
Chelsea
book.
Very nice publisher to deal with. Well, they had a booth at Book Expo. They've since stopped exhibiting. But back then they had a booth, and they had a book with a placard, foam board poster about sustainable hedonism. And I was wearing my T-shirt with the penny pinching hedonist on the cover. And I went up to the publisher and I pointed to his foam board and I pointed to my shirt and I said, we have to talk. And we talked our way to a book deal. So that's a book deal that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been at Book Expo. The two foreign rights sales, I did not meet the people who saw those books. I paid a small amount of money, like $80 or $100, to have the book exhibited at a co-op display put on by what is now called Independent Book Publishers Association, IBPA. And they have a big, big pavilion at Book Expo every year, and it's a great place to exhibit your books. There are a lot of places that will exhibit a group of books. I like working with IBPA because the staff will actually take the time to find out what they're exhibiting. So when somebody comes along and says, oh, we're looking for a business book on ethics, they can say, oh, here's Shel's book. And so, you know, and the two sales that I got were both very low dollar amounts. They were actually the lowest of the several books that I've had, I guess 6 books published abroad. But you know, it's still worth doing, even if the money barely covers the exhibit fee, because again, you are buying, not buying, you're being paid to get legitimacy. That is so clear, you know, that, I mean, for my Korean book was published by the Korean equivalent of the Wall Street Journal, a newspaper called the Economic Daily. Let me tell you, you know, when you can say that a publisher like that likes your stuff, people look at you differently.
Excellent. Good point. Excellent point. So the other question about this is that I'm just curious as to how do you go about finding an agent that is going to sell the foreign rights for you?
Well, I really don't have much experience with that. The only book of mine that was sold foreign rights through an agent was that Korean edition of Marketing Without Megabucks, which happened in 1995. And that was the agent who sold the American book to Simon and Schuster in the first place. And she kept the foreign rights. And that was the only one that she actually exploited. But, the publishing universe was a very different place back then. The agent that negotiated the two deals that I got from exhibiting my self-published book, in both of those cases, the deal was there and all the agent had to do was execute it. So, and I had an agent because I had actually met this guy at a conference. We had been on the same panel, if I remember correctly. And then he had represented my penny pinching hedonist to New York and did not find a publisher for it. I ended up self-publishing that book. New York said there wasn't a market for it. And New York actually turned out to be right about that. It was a very hard sell. I had printed 2,200 copies and it took me 8 years to go through them. But I had this connection and he agreed to negotiate the contracts with the Indian and the Mexican publishers. So basically you're going to do it the same way you'd get an agent for a domestic book. You're going to have a book proposal that's too good and a platform that's too good to be left unnoticed. And you're going to be personable and easy to deal with, and you're going to just win them over. It's not an easy process. There are far more people looking for agents than people who have agents. And the main thing is your stuff has to be really good to do this. If you have a crappy book, don't bother.
Well, the other thing about this is, from what I understand, because I did a lot of research for this show, usually self-published author, they want to see that you've sold at least 10,000 books on your own. So they figure...
That's what I want clients is to before they approach, if they're doing the self-published to traditional published route, I say sell 5 or 10,000 copies before you have that conversation. However, sometimes you can get away without doing it. Principled Profit did not sell anywhere near that many, and yet I was able to sell the rights to Wiley. And because of the way I phrased my proposal, and because I did have the advantage of an introduction from one of their best-selling authors, they never asked, how many copies did you sell? Simon and Schuster never asked, well, what were those other 2 books that you published? In both cases, if they had asked, they might not have been eager to do a contract with me, but they never had that conversation because the way that I presented myself as professionally as I did, it never occurred to them to ask.
So presentation is very important. The other thing, be easy to deal with.
Proposals, by the way, it's one of the services that I do is I can really help you get a proposal that New York will notice and pay
So give
attention
us 3 tips on proposals, if you don't mind.
Well, number one, these days it's all about the platform. And platform means how many people you can reach. So they are going to look at how many connections you have on social media, how many subscribers to your newsletter, how long and how frequently you've been blogging, and what kind of mailing list you have, what kind of organizations you're part of that you can reach through various arrangements, who you can get to endorse, and if it's a self-published book, how many copies you sold, how much speaking you do. All of these things are, to the New York publishing mind these days, more important than the quality of the book. However, the quality of the book, this is tip number 2, is second. It's got to be better than anything they're going to find anywhere else. And you want to be able to negotiate from a position of strength. You want them to be really eager to work with you. And that will only happen if you are A, marketable, and B, good at what you do.
And what's the third?
Let's see, the third. The third is to bring in someone who knows what they're doing to help you walk through this process. It is really not something you should try do-it-yourself. I'm a big believer in do-it-yourself when it makes sense to do that. But when you are competing, the last year that I saw statistics for, there were 3 million books published in the United States. Most of them did not even sell 100 copies. So you've got to differentiate yourself from these. You've got to work. Just yesterday, actually, I got an email from a colleague of mine who's also in the socially conscious business space. And he says, oh, yeah, you can go get my new book. And I'm going to press on February 5th. And I immediately wrote to him and I said, don't go to press. Your cover stinks.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and somebody needs to tell him this, and I may have lost the friendship if he doesn't take it right. But if he goes to market with that cover, he will sell very, very few copies. I would much rather say, look, make your expensive mistakes in front of me and in front of your friends, not in front of the general public. Somebody apparently told him that he could do a cover in basically Microsoft Word. It's hideous, and for $250, I know somebody who'll do a good cover for him. For $1,500, $2,000, you can get a fabulous cover. So there's no excuse for going in there with shoddy work. And when I see a shoddy cover, what I think is, well, the book probably isn't edited very well. It may be disorganized. Maybe the author doesn't know his stuff. It reflects all the way down the line.
Well, you know what, Shel, you're not wrong about that. When you see something, the cover's bad on a book and everything is wrong with it, I'll tell you right now, 9 out of 10 times, the inside is the same. I've seen it over and over. People send me books to look at. Oh, I'm so excited with my new book. The cover's the inside. Usually, first page, you start getting the mistakes. So, it's like, or the book is 300 pages and really it's just, 90 pages of content. So looking at it, it's really getting down to the hard task of creating a great book.
Yeah, and some come to me sometimes with a book and they're really proud of it. And I look at the book and I say to them, I'm willing to work with you on this, but before we do that, there's some work that needs to be done.
Yep.
Would you like me to bring in an editor who can clean this up? Would you like me to bring in a better cover designer? And this is a nice thing because I'm more useful to my clients. I give them material to work with that is more than the typical copywriter, just write me a press release, write me a book cover. But I also say, if this is going to come out of my shop, I want it to reflect well on me, and that means that your book has to reflect well on you. And a lot of times they're not ready. And I'm right now actually, this is interesting because this is somebody who gave me a really clean manuscript. Most editors would look at this and say, well, really, you don't need any editing. There's one little minor grammar thing every 15 or 20 pages. But her goal is to be on the bestseller list. And I said, if you want to be a best-selling author, you need a book that is going to reach out and grab people when they open to any page at random in the bookstore. And you don't have that yet. So I'm actually rewriting her entire book, a book that most people would have said, this is good enough. But it's going to be great by the time that we're done. And, I'm going through it line by line. I'm using more contractions and using more active verbs and just making it sparkle. And this is something that the average person if you're relying on your mom or your brother-in-law or your best friend to tell you whether the book is marketable and they don't have the expertise, they're going to give you bad advice and you're going to come out with a shoddy product and it's going to flop.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Shel, I am so sorry to tell you that we're out of time. It seems like it's just been about 5 minutes, but actually, the time keeps ticking and we keep talking. So I hope that you'll come on again. What?
One thing is that if somebody, any of your viewers are working on a book and want 10 or 15 minutes of my time to talk through their project, to talk about which is the best way to publish it, to talk about what kinds of marketing strategies, I will give that to them. My address is shel@greenandprofitable.com and say 15-minute consult Lori in the subject line and we'll get you scheduled.
Well, that's great. Thank you. That's so generous because I tell you, everybody needs help. Everybody needs that extra set of eyes. Everybody needs just really, they really need help. It's tough. It's very tough out there. And your product, just what you said, has to sparkle. So thank you so much for being on the show today. As usual, a wealth of knowledge.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. So that is our show for today. I am so excited to be able to bring that information to you. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please contact me, contact Shel, and have us help because it is really hard to go out there and compete with the big guys and the people that are writing books all the time, especially for first-time authors. So there you have an opportunity, an invitation to contact Shel about your book. And I'm always available as well. So thank you so much. Tune in again for Focus Forward and have a great day.